They're saying now that Bob Iger is exhausted, overwhelmed. He has lost control of the company. He now jokes with his underlings, why in the world did I ever come back? One of the things that he's come back to do is to try to save the content of Disney. One of those sides of content is easier to save than the others, apparently. We're talking about Marvel, where Disney believes they still have a chance and they are watching Loki closely. But another franchise Disney believes is actually struggling more mightily than ever before. And according to at least one source, Disney may be on the verge of icing Star Wars. Hello folks, welcome back to another opportunity to explain entertainment and keep you ahead of the culture curve. We're going to do that today as we are going to dive into these topics that we just previewed to you. We're going to break them down in high resolution. Before we do that, though, we want to say welcome to Lauren Connor, our resident expert and guru, all things Star Wars. And Lauren, we'll begin right away by bringing forth the evidence that Bob Iger is indeed overwhelmed and exhausted, and this will, I think, explain why they're ready to begin culling the content that fails to drive consumers. This out of the New York Post by Ariel Zilber, and it says, Disney CEO Bob Iger overwhelmed and exhausted during company slump. Walt Disney Company CEO Bob Iger has reportedly been left overwhelmed and exhausted by the challenge of riding the ship at the House of Mouse, whose tanking stock price has spurred activist investor Nelson Peltz to further boost his stake in the firm. People in Iger's inner circle told Bloomberg News that the CEO, who recently returned to helm the company with great fanfare after the disastrous tenure of his handpicked successor, Bob Chapek, has often joked to confidants, why did I come back? Now, let's reframe this back into the realm of reality for a moment, Lauren, when it says that it was a catastrophe, a disastrous tenure that was Bob Chapek. Remember, Bob Chapek was doing very well. And this is the interesting thing in the way that some of these outlets remember this. Bob Chapek was doing exceedingly well, and then Bob Iger wanted back in and began to sabotage Bob Chapek. This is not out in the rumor territory. This really happened, and we've followed it closely here on this channel, on the Valiant Renegade channel. Just to give everybody a memory of this, remember that Bob Chapek oversaw Disney at its highest stock evaluation ever. Bob Chapek oversaw the greatest growth for Disney Plus ever. And then we had the situation with that legislation in Florida. And we had the downfall of Bob Chapek as Bob Iger sent out that original tweet back when it was Twitter, back when Bob Iger was still secretly employed by Disney as an advisor, did not give up his shower, and he stepped in and he began to make moves. We now know that Christine McCarthy, the former CFO, went to the various investors out there. We're talking about the legacy investors, the big institutional backers, and said basically, if you keep Chapek, I'm out. I want Iger back. Iger came back, and here we are. Lauren, are you shocked at all that Bob Iger just can't handle this anymore, that he's overwhelmed?
No, not shocked. I'm sure that what he had in mind when he was coming back is kind of like the conquering hero returning. It's a little bit like having the star quarterback after graduation wanting to come back to the adulation of his fans, but they've moved on. It's hard to repeat what had been successfully framed as an epic tenure. It's hard to have a second act after that, especially when the carefully designed plans that you've laid to undermine the people that were there are now coming back to haunt you. And I think that that's really causing him problems. He had all kinds of shields that were available to him from the media, as well as his own Spocks that are out there spinning things for him. But now the media is coming after him, and so are the investors. And that makes it probably hard to deal with the day-to-day.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to also where we're going with this conversation, which is that apparently, according to one source that we've spoken with and who specifically reached out to relay this to us, they're ready to begin icing some of these franchises. We'll describe what that means in just a moment. They're also keen to try to revive Marvel and the MCU. They know that Marvel can hit home runs still, right? We've seen it with Spider-Man No Way Home. We've seen it with some of the other films. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 did just fine, made a profit. They are concerned, though, when they watch the Marvels and they see the kind of lackluster interest that it has, when they see Miss Marvel and its low ratings, when they see Secret Invasion, it gives them serious pause because they don't want to have another situation where one of their tentpole franchises, we're talking about Star Wars here, fails also, right? So they don't want Marvel to turn into Star Wars. Lauren, you've been watching the first season of the the first episode of the second season of Loki. I've watched it as well. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I think you're even more positive about it. What is it about this show that is different than Ahsoka? And then as soon as you tell me that, we do need to get into this message about Star Wars. But what's qualitatively different about Loki versus Ahsoka?
Well, there is an advantage to Loki season 2 in that you have actors that have been established in these parts for a while, so they're comfortable with them. They're professional. Loki is kind of interesting as a spin-off because it is much different than the framing of Loki in Thor. It's a very quirky kind of a show, and that lends it a kind of a charm. I was kind of 50-50 on Loki season 1. I enjoyed some of the episodes, but I felt that it suffered from some of what a lot of the other Disney shows have done, where it felt like it was a bait and switch. The name of the show is Loki. I felt season 1 was mostly about Sylvie. And while there were scenes that I enjoyed, some situations, I actually kind of liked the introduction of Kang. I know that wasn't for everybody, but I kind of enjoyed that performance. But at the end of the season, I kind of shrugged and went, well, it was okay. You reached out to me today and asked if I would be willing to review the second episode of Loki because we thought that it was coming out tonight. And I had kind of a shiver of dread go up my spine because
Here we go again. Here goes Pro dragging me back.
I had no real expectations that it was going to be any good. I've been burned so much by what I've seen recently. But I asked you, do I have to watch episode 1? And you said you didn't really think that it mattered, but it would be fine if I did. So I decided, well, I don't want to go in not knowing what happened. So I watched it. And my son sat down and watched it with me. And we both laughed several times. And that was surprising to me. It's not great. It's not, I wouldn't call it like an 8 or a 9 or a 10, but I would maybe give it a solid 7 and maybe even an 8. And that really surprised me. I did want to watch the second episode. And so that's a good sign. If they can keep that quality of writing up, I'll be both amazed and delighted. Now, I don't know if they can do that, but at least the first episode was great.
Disney is great at snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory. We'll see if they do it again. With the first season of Loki, the first 2 episodes of season 1, I thought were some of the best television I've ever watched in the genre of drama and action. And then they switched that into utter propaganda, and I hated it all the more because of the fantastic premise. With this season, what I'm hearing is that they may not do that because they're desperate. They can't take any more L's. They are losing and losing and losing. And I want to get in now, folks, to the message that we have received. We're going to not, of course, tell who this comes from. And yes, it's rumor and speculation because we cannot confirm what this person is telling us. We can only say that this individual is highly placed, knows their stuff. They've sent us this message, and we're going to report it to you. Now, as we do this, also note that we have run this. This is the degree to which we're keeping it secretive. We've run this through an artificial intelligence program, and we have told it to rewrite what they've said in the voice of John Grisham. We've done that humorously in order to mask their writing style, lest people out there figure out who they are. Here is what they have to say, Lauren. You've seen this, but for the audience, this is new.
Our source is John Grisham.
That's right. That's straight out of the author's mouth. Burbank still wrestling with the fallout from Ahsoka, and it ain't a pretty picture. Turns out there's a whole lot less enthusiasm for both the character and the storyline than they'd initially banked on. It was shaky ground to begin with. Now it's circling the drain, and I'm not talking about some TV series. The word on the street is that Bergman and Walden could not be less thrilled with how Thrawn's been handled in the new show. Disney's higher-ups are losing faith in Dave Filoni. They're downright flabbergasted that Kathleen Kennedy thought this was up to snuff. Behind Disney's curtains, there's a whole pile of stuff I can't get into. Big changes brewing at the company. Most of it has not made its way yet to the public radar. The powers that be are trying to figure out how to get a handle on the mess. Kathleen Kennedy's days are numbered, though prying her loose is going to be a colossal headache. I don't have the scoop on when she's heading out the door, but the talks are happening. Wish I had more, like I assume your other contacts have. They're looking at putting the Star Wars franchise in deep freeze for their big projects. You might see some animation, maybe see some remasters, but they're done burning cash on failures like this. They're looking to ice any projects that aren't in active development. Think 2 to 3 years of nada on the live action and cinematic front. They need to cool things down and bring in fresh blood. Now, this is where I go to you, Lauren. If we think about the stuff, and if this source is right, if we think about the stuff that is in development, we assume that the farthest out item that Star Wars has that's actually in active development, not in pre-production or anything like that. I assume that Mandalorian Season 4 has had some work done on it. Is that your understanding?
I believe all the scripts are written, but I don't think that there's probably been much more done beyond that. They might have some pre-production artwork. I don't know if they've got an art department working on it, but everything else, I suspect, is probably just waiting to see when we can start kind of a thing.
Here's why I think it probably is farther along. They shoot the Mandalorian inside what's called the volume, which is this fully immersive CGI thing, and I assume that continued to be worked upon so that they can go straight into just shooting this as soon as they're ready. That's my assumption here. So if we assume that, and I could be wrong, but if we assume that, the Mandalorian Season 4 would be the farthest thing out that I know of that they would then, that would be the ending point and they would take a break, if this source is correct. Now,
are we talking about for just TV shows or movies as well?
It seems to me live action and movies. So here's what I was going to say. This seems far-fetched at first, Lauren, until you think about this. So we know that The Acolyte is coming out in 2024. That's what we assume. Okay. And then we think that The Mandalorian probably would come out maybe 2025. So if this source is correct, we would be looking at maybe 2027 as the return, for Star Wars live action stuff. Now, that may seem like a long time, but consider this actor strike that still has not ended. The WGA yesterday ratified their deal. The actors have not yet. They've not come to any kind of decision. If 2024 comes around and the actors still haven't sat down at the table, I don't think that's terribly out of the realm of possibility that Star Wars, it would take 3 to 4 years for them to get a movie off the ground anyway. So this isn't actually shocking to me at all. Do you think that it's too far out, or do you think that Star Wars needs a pause such as this?
I definitely think they need a pause, and I would say minimum 5 years, I think, maybe longer. But you're walking a razor's edge there. Part of the reason that Star Wars is in such bad shape right now is that I believe that it failed to capture the next generation of fans. Part of the reason that the prequels went through a reevaluation is because of the Clone Wars and the kids who grew up with it. They were more fans of the animated series, and that pulled them into the prequels. That became their Star Wars, their primary entry point into the series. I don't believe the sequel trilogy has that. I think that's what they were hoping that Filoni was going to be able to accomplish, but I don't think that that's been successful. And so if you leave it dormant, I'm not sure that there's going to be a nostalgia play that you can make, and that's a big problem for them.
It is indeed, and I was walking through the post-attraction area for a space ride, Mission Space in Epcot, one of the theme parks at Disney World, and I was shocked to see how much Star Wars stuff they were selling in there because, well, Disney's not going to sell unique merchandise anymore, and so they just fill this, space attraction with generic Star Wars toys and such. It just seems to me they're tied to Star Wars now, and they can't stop the machine. So if they do stop for 2 to 3 years, I think that'll be significant. Whether it's successful, I don't know. Now, here's where things get interesting. Here's what the source says to us. As for Filoni, well, he missed the mark big time. He needed double the audience just to scrape by. Now, that's new. I had not heard that he needed double the audience. I would assume that means that he needed 20 million plus. Disney's claiming they had 14 million plus. So he needed significantly more, closer to 30 million in the audience. Sounds to me like also, sounds to me also like if we judge it based on Nielsen's minutes watched, Ahsoka's running down there around Andor level. They must have wanted double that at least. Anyway, he needed double the audience just to scrape by, and the show managed to bleed viewers over time. We'll see if that plays out, folks. If you're wondering if this source is right, we're going to see if that plays out over the rest of the season. In the old days, linear TV, we'd be talking cancellation for a second season, no doubt. it would be a done deal. But Disney's got a whole other set of problems to deal with now, and it's a tangled mess. They promised a movie that hardly anyone's keen on watching, and it's all hitched to The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda, so they're pulling down the little they had that worked for a while. Here's the kicker. They're trying to hatch a post-Kathleen Kennedy plan for Star Wars. Apparently, in a meeting back in July before the Ahsoka fiasco, and we're redacting the name of the individual here, had the gall to say right in front of Iger, why the heck are we doing this? Why tie a franchise to a dud of a story? We're not doing this with any other franchise we've got. Now, folks, before we ran this through the artificial intelligence filter to block this, the ability for you to understand who wrote this, I will say that it was more explicit. This was talking about the sequel trilogy there, as in, why are we tying this to the sequel trilogy? I'm told Iger was open to the idea, though not quite ready to jump in at the time. That could be changing. And here's where we finish up with what the source had to say. If you want to gauge how much trouble Lucasfilm's in, don't be shocked if Disney ropes in an independent creative to lead a Star Wars project completely disconnected from anything tied to LFL. As it stands, whether Lucasfilm thrives or tanks, Disney's paying out lump sums because it's all in-house. Filoni's not sweating residuals. He's getting that exec pay no matter what. They've got to break free from that real quick. Now, quick. Lauren, to explain that for the audience, and then you hop in, but to explain that, we've seen out of this WGA deal, that it's the success of a show is going to be tied into pay. Dave Filoni is a one-man writing team right now. Right. He's the only person who wrote Ahsoka. He's it. And the way that works is that he's an executive. So he gets paid executive salary regardless. He makes big bucks no matter what. And so I think what the source is saying is that they may go for this Netflix model where they hire somebody and that somebody has to hit milestones, or that somebody does not get paid anywhere close to what they could. And then that gives that, that creative team that's a third party the impetus to do well, whereas it seems to me that Lucasfilm doesn't care. I mean, it boggles my mind. I don't think Lucasfilm cares. I can't come to any other conclusion than they write what they think that we should have to watch. I think that's their modus operandi.
I do have a question about the way that was framed, though. He's talking about bringing in a third party to write and potentially be a showrunner, a writer's room, that kind of thing. Would this potential show still be done in-house at Lucasfilm, though? Would they just be acting as contractors, kind of like Jon Favreau did? Or are we talking about licensing out to another studio entirely?
The VFX I'm not sure about, but the way I read this is that it would be more independent than what Jon Favreau has done. For those who don't know, Jon Favreau is not an employee of Lucasfilm. He has his own company, Gollum Creations, that comes in and does The Mandalorian. But, Lucasfilm still provides VFX, and the story group is there to assist, and he's still tied to the hip with Dave Filoni, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds to me like what they're suggesting here is you might get a situation like with Stranger Things, where Netflix contacts the Duffer Brothers, and the Duffer Brothers run it. And then Netflix rewards the Duffer Brothers or penalizes them depending on how they do. Now, they've always rewarded them because it's a phenomenal show with phenomenal viewership. Sounds to me like that Disney may be contemplating throwing this to somebody else. And I got to say, at least for proof of concept, if you got it out of the hands of Kathleen Kennedy and whatever you gave to someone else did well, that might be proof enough that you should stop giving her the content. And then maybe you could downsize Lucasfilm. Maybe that's the solution.
Yes, but the elephant in the room, the elephant in the room is still the sequel trilogy. You're not fixing this without getting rid of that. I
agree with that.
I don't think there's any way to write yourself out of the hole that they're in. And so until they're ready to swallow that pill, I'm not sure this is a viable strategy either.
Well, that was one of the things in the message. We apparently an executive, we won't say who, but apparently an executive just said in front of Bob Iger, why are we doing this? We don't do this with any other franchise. And sure enough, look at what Loki is doing. To circle back to Loki, Loki is all about timelines. Now, I don't like the multiverse when it's too big and too broad because it negates the stakes that are at hand. It makes people not care about the characters because there's a million more that can replace any character at any given time. But at least with a limited multiverse, you at least have the ability to toss away stories that aren't doing you any favors. And the sequel trilogy is not doing any favors. Lauren, here's what I'll say, and you tell me if I'm wrong here. I would say that for every dollar that Lucasfilm could make, 80 cents of it is gone due to the sequel trilogy. I'm saying that 80% success is just eliminated. 80% of the potential audience is just gone. 80% of the merchandise is gone as long as the sequel trilogy sits there.
Your number's a little bit higher than mine. I've estimated that I think they're down to about 25%, maybe 30 if I'm being generous.
Of the original fan base, or the original size of the fan base.
Yeah, especially when talking about enthusiasm levels. But I think that's kind of going back into this. You mentioned that they were talking about how hanging all of this on Ahsoka was a bad idea. And a lot of that is because of the framing. Ahsoka is a very popular character, but with a subset of the fandom, and that's not a bad thing. You can't expect everybody to be following all of the materials, but they were treating this like this was going to be the magic bullet that was going to fix everything. And if you don't frame that properly, if you don't give a proper introduction to this character for people who aren't familiar with it, they're going to be lost and they're going to tune out. And I think that's one of the many reasons why so many people did.
What do you make, Lauren, to finish this conversation today? What do you make of the idea that Disney is overwhelmed? And I mean, the reports are coming out that Iger is overwhelmed. And folks, I'm here to tell you, there's stuff that you don't know about and we can't talk about yet. And we're just sitting on it because we have to. I can't say anything else, but Bob Iger's overwhelmed for reasons you don't know about yet. But what do you make of the idea that Disney may not be able to manage trying to save two franchises? And so maybe that's the reason they're saying, hey, let's put Star Wars on the freezer for a moment. And let's do everything we can to save Marvel because it's in a better spot.
I hate saying this because Star Wars is my main line, but I think they're right. I mean, there are too many fires. And what you need to start doing right now is digging trench lines and trying to get it contained. And one way that you do that is you eliminate all the fronts that you're trying to fight on so that you could focus on the major parts of the fire. That's what I think they might be trying to do. It's an open question whether they can be successful, but at least they understand now the danger and they're trying something. That's some kind of progress. So let's give them a little bit of rope to see what they do.
There you go. Well, all I can say is that if you look at Lucasfilm and their track record, and you look at Marvel's track record, Marvel's not done great as of late, right? I mean, the Phase 4 was a fiasco. The Phase 5 has been a dive. But there have been diamonds in the rough. And with Lucasfilm, there aren't any diamonds. There's nothing. I mean, you killed Willow, which, how do you kill a dormant franchise? You decimated Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny. I mean, that franchise is just in a terrible place now. You've done the same thing to Star Wars. You have taken all the excitement that surrounded Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, and you've flung it out the door. I don't even think that poor Jon Favreau. I mean, I don't know. Is anybody going to be excited with anything that he does now? That is the legacy of Star Wars, is everybody that comes into Kathleen Kennedy's version of it walks away damaged. James Mangold suddenly became a raving lunatic. Rian Johnson's forehead got 2 times the size that it was before. That is the situation with Lucasfilm. They say that presidents of the United States age 3 or 4 times faster while they're in office. By the way, they don't. But it may actually be the case with anyone who goes into the hallowed halls, those hallowed haunted halls of Lucasfilm. Come out more cynical and more bitter than ever before. Lauren, where can people find you and your totally not cynical and not bitter content on this great, big, beautiful web?
You can find me as a writer on That Park Place. You can find me at Lauren Connor on X, and you can find me at Lauren Connor 9030 on YouTube.
All right, folks, make sure you check out Lauren. He is not just a guru on this channel, but he is a guru on his own channel, and you are missing out so much if you're not subscribed to him. Also, we are missing out if you don't click that like button, share, subscribe, and when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. We cover your comments. We care about what you think. Once upon a time, Lauren was just a guy who commented on something that I did. He disagreed with me. And rather than being upset about that, I looked at it and realized he was probably right. And I said, oh my gosh, this guy needs to be on the team because he's fantastic. And well, here we are. So maybe that could be you, folks. drop a comment down below and join the curse of Pro calling you up and saying, hey, watch more Disney Plus stuff with me. Orin says, no. All right, folks, that's a wrap for today. We hope that you are making the world a better place because there's plenty of ugliness out there, but you don't have to be part of that. Go out there and find a way to make the day of somebody. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Make sure to catch The Pro Show Thursdays 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Entertainment Explained, The Culture Curve Conquered, live with Pro and all his friends.